Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Purpose Maker. My name is Dr. Wegmann, host of the Purpose Maker podcast, and I've got a special guest this morning. This is Lieutenant Keegan Gill, retired from the Navy, and he was a Navy aviator. Is that the proper way to say it?
Yeah, Naval Aviator.
Naval aviator. And we're going to go over his story today. We're going to talk about his book. We're going to talk about some of the stuff he's been through. But what I'm most interested in talking about is his recovery. That's what I find fascinating. And then how you did it, the mindset that it took, and how you rebuilt yourself. You can see the book here. It's Phoenix Revival. I read the book, so I was texting him back and forth over the holidays. His call name is Smurf. I'm not going to give it away. It has nothing to do with being blue. It has nothing to do with Smurf. You have to read the book to find that out, and you don't have to give it away either.
All right.
Because I think that's a great call name, and very few people would understand why you got named that until they read the book. So his story is pretty incredible. He had to eject, 0.96 Mach, roughly?
Yeah, I think 0.95 Mach, 695 miles per hour.
He had to eject out of a
A-18E
Super Hornet. Yeah, so, and you'll find this stuff in the book. He was doing the training, had a mishap, had to eject, and 695. We're close to the sound barrier, aren't we?
Yeah, it's basically transonic. So right before you penetrate the sound barrier, which is incredibly high parasitic drag acting on the human body at that speed.
Fast. And obviously he lived to tell us the story. So that's why you're here today to kind of go over this with us. I encourage you. I think that you can find this on Amazon. Am I correct?
Yes, that's about the best place to get it. You can get it on Amazon, hardcover, paperback, get ebook, and it's on Audible as well.
Sweet. I'll put a link to the book so you can purchase that. Okay, so we're not designed to eject at almost the speed of sound, right?
That is true.
So we're going to get to that story, but what I love for my listeners to kind of do is get to learn somebody. Okay, so let's start early in life. Let's kind of start, where you grew up, kind of some of that history, and then we'll move right into your recovery and that kind of stuff. So where was upbringing, childhood?
Yeah, I was born in Oklahoma. I don't remember a whole lot there except the ticks and the snowballs or softball size hail we'd get on occasion.
Jeez.
When I was 3, we moved to southern Colorado in a place called Alamosa in the San Luis Valley. Some of my earliest memories are riding on my dad's backcountry skiing out through the foothills of the San Luis Valley with the Rocky Mountains in the background. Bombing down, we used to go to Wolf Creek is where I got to learn to ski, which pretty much spoiled me for skiing for the rest of my life.
Do that.
At a pretty early age, I just loved being outside. I love exploring. I love going fast on my skis. By the time I was about 5 years old, I was bombing down every black diamond run I could hit and just blasting through the deep powder and loving life. When I was about 7 years old, we moved to Traverse City, Michigan, where both my parents kind of grew up and just became one with the woods out there. I loved hunting and fishing and camping and backpacking and just going down in the back of our yard. We had a little creek and I'd be down there grabbing salmon out of the creek with my hands. And I really loved the outdoors and just adventure and life. And when I had to get stuck in a classroom under fluorescent lighting, I didn't necessarily fit very well.
You didn't flourish.
No. Mm-hmm. Filling out Scantron bubbles under fluorescent lighting was not my go-to. And I became, I don't know, I felt trapped in that world, not happy. And once I graduated from high school, there was a flight program at NMC in Traverse City, Northwestern Michigan College. And I decided I'd try that out. It sounded like a good way to get out of the cubicle and get out of that world of the work life, but still have a respectable career. Mm-hmm. And so I pursued aviation early in life, became a flight instructor by the time I was a junior in college, finished my bachelor's degree, and then worked as a flight instructor for a bit. I got hired as a corporate pilot by a company called Poneman Institute out of Traverse City, and ended up flying their little personal aircraft all over the country, which was an incredibly good gig for coming fresh out of college. You know,
Sure.
especially at that time. This is like 2007, 2008, and the stock market had just crashed, and
Ooh.
businesses were hurting, and the airline industry was a wreck. And so most of my friends that I went to flight school with were just struggling to get by. You know, they're getting paid 15 grand a year, flying for the regional airlines, living 5 dudes in a little shack down in Detroit. Just not a good life. And on the other hand, I had this cushy, flying all over, getting $500 bottles of wine at dinner every night with these guys, having business meetings, and got exposed to the tech industry and privacy consulting and research, which was really eye-opening to how much information the tech industry can extract from people, which is pretty scary.
It's pretty scary.
I had a good gig, but I found myself after about a year of doing that I was getting bored again, and I needed something more in my life, some more adventure. So I had a buddy I went to flight school with, Mark, who was a flight instructor, and he was applying to go into the Navy through officer candidate school. And at the time, I didn't understand anything about going into military aviation. I had seen the Blue Angels performing in Traverse growing up and thought it was incredible.
I've done that too.
But
That
I
is
was like,
incredible.
there's no way some community college kid can go fly those things. He's
Yeah.
like, no, there's a program for that. It's called Officer Candidate School. You already have a bachelor's degree. You just got to put in a package and apply. It's like, oh, don't you have to go to the Naval Academy? Doesn't your dad have to be an admiral? Don't like
Nothing. You're in.
not just the kid off the street can go do that, but it turns out you can. And so I put together a package, got accepted. And a few months later, I was getting yelled at by Marine Corps drill instructors and actually loving it. You know, I really liked the high intensity and the way it tests people and kind of brings out the best of humanity when you're in that environment.
Definitely pushes you to be more
Yeah.
than you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And end up going through flight school and selected tailhook out of primary flight training. So I was going to get to fly something that landed and launched off the aircraft carrier. I didn't know if it was going to be a fighter jet at that point, but I worked my butt off in flight school. I wasn't the smartest kid there. You know, there's all these like valedictorians and D1 athletes and just superhuman people, which was incredible to be around. And I always had this bit of imposter syndrome. Like, they're going to find me out eventually that I'm just this community college kid. But turns out working really hard and having a good attitude goes a long way in that flight training. And I ended up selecting the Super Hornet upon my winging in 2012, and went to Virginia Beach, Virginia to train at VFA 106 Gladiators to learn how to fly the Super Hornet, which was an absolute dream come true.
All right. Question leading up to that. So when you got in, before you got that selection, how much flying did you do?
Before I even got into the Navy or in Navy flight training?
In Navy flight training.
It was pretty rapid pace. I think you only have about a couple hundred hours of flight time.
What are you flying at that time?
Initially, you fly at that time was the T-34 Charlie Turbo Mentor. They've transitioned over to the T-6 Texan, but it's a high performance, fully aerobatic turbine prop aircraft. Pretty dang sporty for people who were just starting flying with that as their first aircraft. Very complex aircraft.
So you were pretty versed already?
Yeah, you know, I already had the stick and rudder skills. I could talk on the radio. I could multitask, which was helpful. But there was also the other edge of that sword, which was now I have to relearn how to do everything the Navy's way, which presented its own challenges.
Sure.
And there was also, you know, at this point, I already had 1,300 hours of flight time.
That's a lot.
Going into the Navy, which was more than most of my instructors going through. And so there was a bit of a personality clash with some folks who are like, oh, this guy's got all these flight hours and we're going to crush him extra hard. But I persevered through that experience. But yeah, the Navy flight program is incredibly minimal, but it's amazing what it teaches you in that time. Because each flight hour, you're prepping like 6 to 8 hours. There's so much work that goes into each flight. You're learning so much. They call it drinking out of the fire hose, you know, the whole way through. But by the time you get a couple hundred hours in, you earned your wings at that point, but then you're still like a brand new little baby going into the world of fighter aviation.
Could somebody with zero aviation skills start that program?
Yeah, it's actually a skill a different way is more difficult than just learning it the way they want you to do it.
Sure. Okay, so then you pick, what do you call it? A tail?
Initially tail hook selection, and then I selected the Super Hornet F-18s out of that.
How many
wing
things
process.
land with the tail hook?
So in the Navy, there's the, at the time it was the F-18 Charlie Hornet, the Legacy Hornet, which is like 1980s technology.
Mhm.
There's the F-18 Super Hornet, which is like the workhorse of the Navy that's still operational. Basically the newer version. It's a funny story behind the F-18, in that it was during a time when Congress would not fund a new program for an aircraft, but the Navy knew they needed to upgrade their aircraft. So they basically created the Super Hornet to look a lot like the Legacy Hornet so that they could pass it as an upgrade vice an actual new airframe. But it's a completely new, different airframe from the Hornet, despite the fact they look very similar. But that was by design so they could get it passed.
So what is the cost of a Super Hornet?
In 2014 dollars, the aircraft I ejected out of was about an $89 million price tag. So adjusted for inflation today, that's probably 120 plus million.
I was going to say 120 million. Yeah, it's a pretty amazing machine. Okay, so now you select say it again, the tail
hook.
Tail hook. You get into the Super Hornet.
Mm-hmm.
Take me from the story there. Keep going.
Yeah, so I was at VFA 106 in Virginia Beach, and at this point, you got your wings on your chest, like, hey, I know something, I'm somebody, but turns out you're just another cog in the machine. And that year of flight training in the Super Hornet was one of the most difficult things I've ever gone through. It's incredibly high standards. You're training with combat experienced pilots who know their stuff, and it's just a brutal experience for anybody, even those who work their asses off. Basically, very little excuse for not being prepared or not having the knowledge or performing in the aircraft. A lot of stress, but at the same time, you're getting to do some of the coolest stuff in the world. I remember just walking into the hangar and getting to see these things up close, and they're so much bigger, up close than they look up in the sky when you're watching the Blue Angels.
Sure.
It was absolutely surreal. I remember just putting on my gear for the first time, my G suit and my harness, my helmet, and like walking out on the flight line to get behind the control of the Super Hornet. Just like, I can't believe I'm doing this.
That's a good feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you're getting introduced to that world, do you fly with somebody first in that Super Hornet?
Or there's initially, you do a bunch of computer-based training. So it's just
a lot of simulation.
Days and days and days of just clicking through to get some of the baseline knowledge and rote memorization down.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do lectures on all the aircraft systems, emergency procedures. And then very quickly you're into the simulators. And the simulators are really good for procedural training, where you learn how to deal with emergencies, learn the basics of the aircraft, how to flip the switches. And so that's kind of the initial stage. But after a very quick simulator syllabus, you're right into the aircraft doing your first flight. And you're only doing, I think you only do about 4 flights with a tandem cockpit where the guy in the back has a stick. They call it FT aircraft. Mm-hmm. And then on about, I think it's your 5th flight, you're solo. So you've only been in this aircraft for like 4 hours and you're blasting around solo in it. But that's how good the building block process is of the Navy training process.
So what does it feel like when you hit the thrusters? Is that what you hit when you take off?
Yeah, you push the throttle up into afterburner. And so that throws fuel into the exhaust and turns the thing into a rocket. And I remember taxiing the thing out, it feels like a tank. It's so huge compared to anything I'd ever operated. But as soon as you get on the runway and you put that thing into the afterburner, man, it feels like that thing's as light as a feather, and you just get stuck in the back of your seat. And
wow,
there's an incredible acceleration force.
And then does that force subside once you lift off?
Yeah. Yeah. That initial acceleration is pretty exciting. And then you're in the air and then everything just happens very quickly. And that's really what you're training in that pipeline, is to be able to have your brain process and act in a faster way, faster, because now you immediately got to put your gear up. Now you immediately got to there's just one thing after another. You're constantly, and the aircraft's so complex because now you're not only flying an aircraft, you're operating weapon systems, sensors, all these other components that go into it that make fighter aviation a class of its own. It's because it's not just about flying the aircraft. It's about being so good at and have the flying be so intuitive that now you can also micromanage or multitask in an extreme level. And all the tactics and different. I mean, the cool thing about the Super Hornet is you get to be the jack of all trades, master of none. You get to do the air to ground missions, so strike, so dropping bombs, doing close air support. You get to do fighter aviation, so air to air intercepts with aircraft 100+ miles away, and then you get to bring it into like air combat maneuvering, BFM, dogfighting. Is probably what people think of when they think of fighter pilot, is, you know, wrapping it up with another aircraft within
Those are the
range.
3 different types of ways that the aircraft would interact.
Oh, and so many more.
There's
you know,
more.
there's maritime employment, electronic attack. There's like a whole plethora of missions that you have to learn, and plus you have to learn carrier operations. So landing and launching off an aircraft carrier in the day and at night. And I think to date we're still, I think we're the only country that will do night carrier operations. It's so dangerous.
That seems like a big advantage, though.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's our primary way we operate.
Time to function. Okay, so what do you remember the first time you took off on that plane? So you take off, plane gets up. How long's the flight? How many other guys are flying? Give me that scenario.
Yeah. So my first flight, you know, you're just like, there's all this stuff you got to computer program into a mission card, and there's all this tech. You're really operating this flying computer. And I remember getting out to the aircraft, and it's surreal and exciting, and your nerves are just spiked. And the instructor I had his call sign Squeezer, who ended up being in my squadron later in my career. But I remember I got in, and like, I'm just trying to figure out how to get this thing started and troubleshoot. And you never get into a Navy aircraft and everything's working properly. You're always troubleshooting systems that aren't operating properly. And there's a lot of overwhelm in that, because that doesn't really always present itself in the simulator as realistic as it is.
Sure.
But I remember we got out, we took off, I put the gear up, and I'm like, what comes next? I'm like, oh yeah, we got to fly to this checkpoint. And then I go to pull up the moving map to see where's this checkpoint. And I realized that my mission card didn't load properly. And so the guy in the back, like, this is within seconds of taking off. He's like, so where are we going? I'm like, shit, I already fucked this up. And luckily he punched in a few waypoints. He's like, all right, we're good to go. Fly out to the area. At this point, I'm like, oh, I already failed this flight. And but went out, got to do a bunch of aerobatics in the aircraft, got to kind of perform the aircraft to see how it operated. And I remember it's such a smooth flying aircraft. It's so stable. It's so smart, because there's this advanced computer system that you're basically communicating with through that stick. That's taking into consideration the air density, the temperature, the weight, all of these things go into the computing. So it's like, all right, dumb pilot, I see you want to turn the aircraft left and pull it. Well, okay, here's what I'm going to do, the flight controls to make that happen. So it's, as far as flying, that aircraft is very nice to fly, but got to rip it around, perform it at the edge of its capabilities, pulling a lot of G's, and got back, and everything in the rest of the flight went smooth. And so I ended up passing, but there's a lot of nerves that go into that world where you're just constantly being graded, constantly being assessed.
What's the most G's you've felt?
Well, you go to the centrifuge trainer before you go into the aircraft itself, before you even go into the tailhook community. And so they put you into this centrifuge that spins you around,
so you can get it.
And do the centrifuge is so brutal, because in an aircraft, like, you pull high G, but the aircraft bleeds energy, so it doesn't sustain that for very long, which is much more tolerable. But in the centrifuge, it just puts on high G, and it holds you there and holds you there and holds you there.
So is this like the thing at the what do they do at the fair? That one that spins and the chairs kind of slide up. Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Is it something like that, just faster?
Yeah, it's like that, but faster, and you're in a little capsule that's just spinning around.
Oh, so you're like in a coffin.
You're in a dark little coffin thing. You can't see outside. It's like it can be nauseating for people. And dude, after you get done with that centrifuge training, you get what's called the G measles, because your G suit's you've been squeezing so hard to keep the blood in your brain that you pop blood vessels all over your body. So you get out and you look in the mirror that night, like when you're taking a shower, and like your whole body's just covered in bruises all over the place.
Oh man.
But that was the most brutal, probably. And then you get in the jet and you're ready for it. But you know, I'm a shorter guy, stockier build, had done a lot of weight training, and so that I was very G tolerant. But typically, guys that are leaner and taller have a lot more struggle in the centrifuge. The longer the distance that gets between your heart and your brain, the harder it gets to force the blood into your brain and keep yourself conscious.
Is there a height restriction on pilots?
There is. It's not as simple as your standing height. They do anthropedic measurements. So they measure the distance from your butt to your knee. They measure your sitting height from your butt to your head. And your arm reach, and there's
You
a
got
lot
to get
of
under the cockpit, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd say probably 6 feet's about the taller side of pilots, and there's also weight restrictions on both ends for the ejection seat. So I think you got to be at least 135 pounds, and you're not supposed to be more than maybe 225. And occasionally guys get waivers for that, but actually most of the fighter pilots are pretty small dudes.
Yeah, I was thinking like NASCAR and
Yeah,
I mean, there's an advantage to being small and strong.
yeah, for sure.
Especially when you're operating something like that. Okay, so then your first flight, you get up, you figure things out. Then how much flying do you do in that aircraft?
So it's about a year-long syllabus. You do about, I think it's about 100 hours in that first year, but it's high intensity the whole way through. You're constantly learning new things. You're doing the transition phase, which is where you're just learning the aircraft, how to navigate it, how to operate it, how to deal with emergencies. Then you go into strike syllabus where you're learning close air support, bombing missions, all those weapon systems. Then you do fighter, which is where you're doing air-to-air intercepts. So interacting with aircraft that are way out in the distance, which is where most of the fighting is done in the air. Then you learn BFM, basic fighter maneuvering, which is dogfighting. And then towards the end of the syllabus, you do the CQ phase, carrier qualification, which is really the ultimate test is can you land this thing in the middle of the night in crappy weather on a moving aircraft carrier?
Blind.
And
right?
I mean you get maybe 15 seconds where you can see the Fresnel lens and have some idea, but it's almost all instrumentation that you're flying on.
Okay. So let's talk about that. So you train all the way through, you get to the end of that syllabus. Now you're going to do the aircraft landings. Clearly, you probably start during the day.
Yep.
Okay. And aircrafts are, I mean, the ship is enormous in person, but it can't be that big when you're trying to land a plane on it.
No, it's a huge ship, but when you're trying to land on a little tiny target in a fighter jet going 160 plus miles per hour in the night with bad weather, it gets really tiny.
So what are you landing on? Is it 300 yards, 400 yards? What do you have roughly?
You know, I can't remember the exact length of the landing area, but I don't think it's much more than a couple 100 feet that you're landing on. You know, there's the ship is longer than that, but there's a landing area and it's pretty small, but you're trying to catch, there's typically 3 or 4 wires. And so you're trying to catch one of those wires with the tail hook.
Okay.
But when you do catch a wire, you
instantly
instant deceleration.
Yeah.
That just, I mean, it rips the air out of your lungs. But then you get to launch out the catapult on the front end, which is as exciting as that takeoff was in full afterburner on the runway. The acceleration force of 0 to 180 seconds in 2 seconds, 0 to about 180 miles per hour in 2 seconds is just like the most extreme acceleration force I've ever felt.
So what catapults you? Is there another cable?
There's a steam catapult. There's like a huge piston underneath the aircraft carrier deck. And there's a little shuttle that sticks up on the deck in a groove. And so you have a bar that comes down on your nose gear and that attaches into that shuttle. And then they pressurize the steam behind that. And when the shooter gives the go ahead and you give them the salute, they hit a button and it just freaking
launches
literally catapults you right into the air.
Do they put you at a little bit of an angle so that you're actually, or are you going straight off?
You go straight off, but the aircraft is set up with the trim in a way so that it just sort of gradually climbs away. And they have to time it with the bow. If you know the bow is too low from a wave, they can't launch you. Otherwise, they just shoot you right into the ocean. But yeah, you actually have your hands off once you put the throttles into afterburner. You put your hands off and you just hold on without touching the stick, because if you're on the stick, you'll yank it back into your chest and bad things can happen. So
yeah,
you get up in the air, you catch your breath for a second, and then you take the controls and start flying.
Nice. Yeah, my father-in-law was on the Kitty Hawk.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's
old classic carrier.
Old classic. And I think that's been decommissioned now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that would have been what was that? Vietnam.
Yeah.
So okay, so now tell me about, let's go through like your first nighttime landing.
Yeah, I mean, you've done all this training now. You've earned your wings. You've gone through a year of like the most intense flight training there is on the planet potentially. And then all of it comes down to, can you land this thing in the dark and bad weather?
Comes down to one night.
And if you can't do it, you can't be a naval aviator. You can't be a fighter pilot in F-18. Ooh. And, you know, a lot of people, that's where people get cut from that program a lot.
That's it.
And you're already, you've already proven that you're capable of flying. You're a smart dude. You're a good human being. but it all comes down, can you do this ultimate task? And we get a lot of exchange pilots that come from other services, other branches, other countries, and they'll go through that just to see if they can do it. And oftentimes they fail. So it's really the ultimate aviator test is, can you land this thing in the dark? So it's high stress for sure.
I bet as high as it could be. Failure doesn't always mean death, does it?
No. It's very situational. And if you start to struggle enough consistently, you'll typically get maybe a second chance and occasionally a third chance.
And then pulled from the program.
But you'll get pulled from the program pretty quick. And it's a slippery slope once you start falling down it. But my first night carrier qualification attempt, I failed because I kept boltering. So I was just a little too high. But you're basically trying to fly your head through a 1 foot by 1 foot box, and it's a moving target. And you can have everything looking perfect, and you can be within that last 15 seconds. And right before you touch down, you get hit by the burble, which is this turbulent air that's coming over the tower of the aircraft carrier. And it feels like the hand of God just smacks you out of the air. Next thing you know, you're in a low position or underpowered position, and very quickly you can smash into the back of the aircraft carrier. And so I was being a little timid, and I was keeping myself a little high intentionally, but it was just high enough that I was just missing the wires each time. So I boltered. That's called a bolter, when you miss the wires and touch down and then take right back off again. I'd done that maybe 3 or 4 times, and that was all the fuel I had. So I had to bingo profile all the way back to NAS Oceana, which was a pretty dark, lonely flight. Like, oh man, here goes my dream. But they do a little board with you when you do have a failure like that. And because at this point they have a lot of money invested in you, they want you to succeed. So assuming there's not any major deficiencies or anything that's really dangerous, you oftentimes will get a second chance. And on the second chance, I qualified.
Sweet. So where was this carrier that you were trying to land on? You guys out in the Gulf of America? Were you guys out in the Atlantic?
We were about 200 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Okay. So you're out in the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
And then how far out? So like when you had your failure, how long was your flight back? 5-10 minutes, half hour?
Yeah, it was maybe 15-20 minutes. But it was probably 150, 200 miles that we were out, somewhere in that range. So it goes quick. It goes pretty quick when a fighter jet.
Yeah, I bet covers a lot of ground quickly.
But man, when you're out in the ocean, 200 miles offshore, it's a level of darkness that it's like being in the bottom of a cave. You can put your hand in front of your face when you walk out on the aircraft carrier deck at night, and you can't see your hand.
Yeah, it's black. Okay, so and when you're flying, is it the same thing? Is it pretty dark in the cockpit at night?
Yeah, you have the lights very, very, very low. It's just, you continually crank them down as your eyes adapt over about 30 minutes to the full darkness. Mm-hmm. But it's just barely enough so you can see. That way you have good night vision outside the cockpit.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then bring me through your first successful landing. So how long after the failure did you get another chance?
Yeah, I basically had to do another month of training in what's called FCLP's, Field Carrier Landing Practice. And I went back through the same syllabus I had already completed. But there's a bunch of simulators, a bunch of emergency procedures. Mm-hmm. You do there's an aircraft carrier basically painted on the runway, and you have a Fresnel lens, which is the meatball. This is the optical guiding. And
you actually visually see this through your helmet?
You look outside, you see it with your eyes. It's a little amber light, and it moves up and down on a datum. So there's a green datum, which shows where you want to be. Mm-hmm. And if you get it too high, obviously you're going to miss the wires. And if that little ball goes too low, it's dangerous and you can smash into the aircraft carrier. So you're trying to get that thing just above that datum light and hold it there, which is not too difficult. But once you get in, the last few seconds, that little ball can go from looking perfect to shooting off the top or shooting off the bottom. And so that's... Man. It's that last few seconds. It's really like an intuitive skill you got to build. But yeah, I did the retraining, which was brutal and a lot of stress. And now there's even more pressure to not fail. But I remember I came around and it's nighttime, and you go up and you're dealing with, freaking all sorts of stuff that goes on at night. All sorts of, like, the lights breaking, and now you can't see in the cockpit. There's fumes in the cockpit from sitting on the aircraft carrier deck. Your eyes are watering. Maybe a little bit.
A headache.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on, a lot of pressure. But I remember coming around and lining up, and everything's suitcase, and I'm feeling good. And that first time that hook caught as I hit the deck, I was like, yes, I can freaking do this thing. But I had to do 10 of those. in a row.
In a
basically.
row.
Yeah, you come on and at one point you get fuel and then keep going, but it's a high intensity 10 traps that you got to get.
And they got to be 10 consecutive. Like if you missed one,
there's a little room for error. Like you can bolter 1 or 2, but
okay.
you can't bolter very many. You definitely can't have any that are a dangerous pass where you're coming in low.
Gotcha.
But it was a great feeling to get that
I
done.
bet that was a good feeling.
Freaking, I made it. I'm a Navy F-18 pilot for real.
So in the civilian world, most people would identify that as Top Gun.
No, Top Gun is a separate program in the Navy.
Okay.
That's the weapons training school, and that's typically where you'll go to learn weapons and tactics. So as a younger aviator, you go and you train at that schoolhouse, but to become a Top Gun instructor, you have to go through, you've already had to do a sea tour and performed really well in your squadron to select that as an option where you can go to Top Gun actual and go through the Top Gun course, which I haven't done.
Okay.
But it's, that's like a next tier up in the world of fighter pilot.
Mm-hmm. And then after that, it's combat, right?
Well, you would typically, your first sea tour is where you'll start seeing combat. Mm-hmm. So you'll come right out of that F-18 training syllabus and you'll go to a fleet squadron. And that's where,
which is on a carrier.
Yes. You'll be attached to an aircraft carrier. And you're right off to the races, and you're immediately into a new syllabus. So you have to do strike fighter weapons training syllabus level 2, then level 3. So you can be a combat wingman, section lead, a division lead. So you're leading more and more aircraft, and there's always a new syllabus as you're in the F-18 world.
So you're training and you're active.
Yep.
Constantly training.
Yeah. Everything is always videotaped and assessed, and every debrief, you're only doing an hour flight maybe, but there's 8+ hours of preparation going into each flight. And then on the back end, you're debriefing for hours and hours, going over every little thing.
So do you do that as a team, or is it you debriefing with like one superior?
It depends on the mission. Some missions, it's just you and maybe one other aircraft, and you'll come back and debrief together. But we also do more like large force exercises where there's dozens of aircraft up in the airspace, and you'll come back together, debrief individually, and then you'll meet in a group and do like there's a whole fighter debrief that you can do using tapes, and there's computer programming that shows like the positions of the aircraft. It's very elaborate and involved. It's very strict protocol. It's very stiff environment. And you have to have thick skin in that world because you get picked apart for every little thing you do wrong, and you just have to be able to take it. And I would say that's probably the most beneficial characteristic to have if you want to go into that world, is your ability to learn quickly and not take it personally.
I got a quick story about that. It's pretty interesting. I was a freshman in high school, and there was a senior pitcher. He was throwing 99 miles an hour in high school. So he was getting scouted by 8 teams. I think we'd have scouts at every game, running the radars and stuff. And I remember going out to the mound one time. Our coach was screaming at him, top of his lungs. I don't even remember what he was screaming about. He was just screaming. This guy's name was Chris. He ended up getting drafted by the Padres. So I run out there. I'm like, Chris, what do you do when coach is screaming like that? He's like, oh, I just picture a chainsaw going through his head. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah. He goes, I'm going to throw whatever I want to throw. I don't even worry about it. And at that moment, I understood what tough skin meant, right? Like he was building a mindset that he's getting screamed at in front of scouts and parents, all of us, his buddies, and he wasn't even letting it get to him. Right. I was just amazed at that. I've taught that same concept to my girls. I did not use the chainsaw metaphor. I told them a story. I said, you don't have to picture that going through someone's head, but you got to be able to take criticism and not take it personal.
Yeah.
So, and I hope my girls have learned that. That's kind of what you're describing. They probably tear you up.
Yeah, you have to learn to compartmentalize. You have to learn to remove emotion from the equation, which is really beneficial as a fighter pilot, but not so beneficial necessarily
as a functioning human.
As a functioning human with a relationship or children, when you're just this, the shell of a person, emotional.
Sure.
Level.
Okay, so you go through all the carrier landing, and then how soon after do we have the mishap?
So I ended up selecting VFA 143, the Pukin Dogs in Virginia Beach, as my first fleet squadron. And you show up there, and again, you're right back at the bottom of the freaking totem pole as the fucking new guy, as they call you. And in the Pukin Dogs, you get the call sign poop immediately because you're the most worthless part of the dog.
They just beat you up every different way, don't they?
Oh man, it's nonstop. And yeah, everyone gives you a hard time. And it was, you know, as you're going through flight training, there's like some legitimate animosity towards you as a student that tends to get better and better as you progress. And once you get into a fleet squadron, there's still a little bit of that, but it's mostly like just guys messing with you.
Yeah.
I could tell
they respect your skills at that point.
Yeah. They know that you're not a shitbag, and they know that you've gone through a lot to get there. And as long as you do your job and work hard and listen and don't pretend like you know everything, or at least think you know everything, like it usually goes okay for you. And initially, the guys in the squadron, I could tell they were kind of putting on an act that they were going to give me a hard time. And actually, one of the guys in the squadron, who's probably like one of the nicest guys ever, call sign Yak, they put him up to like be the squadron asshole. I could tell pretty quickly that he was just like
a game,
forcing himself. And so there's a little more. Yeah, you're kind of part of a family at that point. Yeah, you're the little brother, but they love you.
So then, how many are in the squadron?
There's typically about 16 pilots or so. I was in the F-18 Echo Super Hornet, which is a single seat F-18. There's also the Foxtrot, which is a 2-seat Super Hornet. So those typically have about twice as many aviators in it. So the single seat squadrons are pretty tight knit, pretty small group of guys that are doing it. And you end up with, you know, you go in, you think you're going to be a fighter pilot, so your job's to fly, but really you have to also be an officer in the squadron. You have to, you know, run a number of different ground jobs, collateral duties, online training. There's so much more that consumes your day. So you have like a regular desk job, basically. Well, 3 of them. And then you also have to fit in the flying thing on the side,
pilot,
and study in your own time, basically. So it's long days, you know. It's not uncommon to be in the squadron 16 hours a day, 5-6 days a week, just grinding away.
And you're flying a ton at this point too, still training?
Yeah. Several times a week, you're getting up in the aircraft flying. And I'd been in the squadron for about 8 months. So finally starting to not be the new guy. There's like 5 or 6 newer guys in the squadron than me. And kind of starting to feel like, okay, I think I got this. And that was the day of my mishap.
All right. Well, let's talk about that a little bit. How'd that day start? Do you remember that?
Yeah, you know, at this point, like I kind of felt I was in the groove, you know, getting up in the morning, doing my thing, had my routine. Initially had to go into the weapons school and do a bunch of large force exercise training or planning, which is not the most fun thing that people think of when they think of fighter pilot. They didn't have this in the Top Gun movies. But, you know, you're sitting at a computer at a laptop programming mission cards and doing computer nerdy stuff, which is a huge part of that. But that afternoon, I was going to get to go out and do some dogfighting, some air combat maneuvering, which
and
is
this would be like a plane, an American plane to a foe is kind of what you're simulating.
Yeah, exactly. You're training how you would fight against different threats in different situations. And so for the large force exercise, it's called a self-escort strike, which is kind of like the ultimate capability of the Super Hornet. That's where you launch an air wing off an aircraft carrier with a variety of different F-18s and E-2s and growlers, like the electronic attack aircraft. And you'll go in and you'll try to strike a target, but you have to fight your way in air to air, eliminate the air to air threat, have a successful drop on your target, and then get yourselves out of the bad guy territory and back to the aircraft carrier in one piece. And so that's a big mission we train for, because it puts together all the different skill sets of being and
there's a lot of people involved, right?
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of planes in the air.
Depending on the size, it can be a couple dozen other aircraft up there. And so just the dangers of deconflicting with that many aircraft in the same piece of sky is pretty intense.
So how many of those would then have to land on a carrier? Would all of you guys have to come back?
Yeah, I mean, if you're operating off the carrier for those, you all have to go. We were currently in the maintenance phase of the squadron I was in, so we were out at NAS Oceana land base, but that doesn't really change much for you. But the aircraft carrier is totally capable of launching and landing the air wing as needed, just like you can off Oceana.
So that day starts, and what's your day consist of? Are you going to get out in some dogfighting?
Yep.
How many planes are going up in the air?
For this mission, it was just going to be 3 aircraft. We actually took off, joined up, and went out. Well, to back it up a little, that morning was kind of funny. A little foreshadowing. So I get it to the squadron after I'd been in Top Gun weapons school all morning, sitting at a computer, making my eyes bleed, and walk in, and my buddy, he's at the SDO desk. And as a joke, he had put up on the whiteboard behind him all these positions of GPS tagged sharks he looked up on the Shark Tracker app. And he had the airspace we were going to be operating in over the ocean. And so he put up all these spots of where the sharks were at. And he's like, hey, man, check it out. There's a 16-foot, 3,500-pound great white shark named Mary Lee right underneath your airspace. And we're looking at the water temps. The water temps is like 37 degrees Fahrenheit. So we had really cold water that year. Below freezing air temps, a little wind. Like, we're joking, today would be a terrible day to eject. Go to my brief, not thinking of anything of it. We get a pretty morbid sense of humor in that world, and you kind of joke about death because you have to.
It happens sometimes.
And and as I'm kind of walking out for the flight, one of the more senior pilots in the squadron, Basil, pulls me over, and on another whiteboard in the ready room in the squadron, there's the names of all the newer guys. And there's like 5 or 6 newer guys in the squadron at this point. They all had just a laundry list of potential call signs. And they got to me, and there's like 1 or 2 someone just threw up there to have something on it. It's like, man, you just haven't done anything dumb enough yet to earn a call sign. So it was kind of unusual to be in the squadron for almost a year at this point, not have a call sign. And the other guys that had joined with me already had them. And so anyways, I go out on the flight. We do some air-to-air refueling. So my friend Buddy is in the tanker jet. So they take an F-18 and stick these big refueling pods on them, and they put out a basket underneath. And so you fly up, you put a little fuel probe out of the nose of the jet, and you plug it in midair, which is, some pretty refined formation flying so that you can do that. Basically, you're flying this little probe into a small basket. And
then how much fuel can you take on?
I mean, you can top off your tanks all the way, but we were just doing it for training. So we would plug in, get a little fuel, disconnect, and then just practice plugging several times just to keep that skill sharp.
Do you remember what a Super Hornet could carry?
I want to say around 18,000 pounds of fuel.
Okay.
So a lot of fuel. But we got some fuel from Buddy's jet, and then my flight lead and I broke off, and then we had some extra airspace and time. And so we set up to do dogfighting, which it was my absolute most favorite thing to get to do in the jet. Been in the jet, operating the weapon systems. There's just a million things going on at once, and it's just super fun, but extremely challenging. And we set up several rounds of fights, and all was going normally. We got to our last fight of the day. We hit what's called Joker fuel, which is you got a little bug you put on the fuel gauge. And so when it gets to a certain level, it'll set off a little oral alert. And
you only have so much time to be in the air.
So at this point, we know, okay, it's time to start getting ready and heading back before we hit bingo, which is like the no shit. You got to head straight back people level. So we had just enough time to set up a quick fight. But with the time compression and the airspace and the fuel, we ended up setting up lower and quite a bit faster than we typically would, just to get out a little bit more training. Flight lead called fights on, and we pitched our jets in each other like a couple medieval knights at the speed of sound. And as we crossed paths, which is called the merge, I was already partially nose low inverted. And so I just opted to roll the jet fully inverted and pull the aircraft down towards the ocean, what's called a split S maneuver. And my flight lead went up, I went down. And normally the Super Hornet can do that maneuver in about 5,000 feet of vertical airspace. And so I remember checking my altitude kind of in the heat of the battle. I was at 10,500 feet at the merge. So I'm like, I've got 5,500 feet above what we do the training hard deck at 5,000 feet. I'm good to go.
Sure.
And I didn't fully comprehend the airspeed I had gotten up to, which was a lot faster than we typically would be in this beam setup that we had done, just because we were compressed on time. But I didn't fully calculate that in my equation, and split second decision as I'm diving down towards the ocean. This thing's pointed straight at the ocean. And then all of a sudden I feel, I'm pulling the jet at 7.5 Gs. So just my head and my helmet alone is probably about 20 pounds on the deck. Now you multiply that by 7.5, that's like having 150 pounds just on your head. Your body and gear weighs like 1,600 pounds. So you can feel all that weight in your body, the strain of it.
It's harder to move.
And you're looking your head around because I'm trying to keep sight of my training adversary up above me. And all of a sudden I just feel the jet stop turning and all those G forces eased off. It's like, what's going on? The stick is in my lap. I'm telling this thing. And very quickly I hear the radar altimeter go off. Altitude, altitude. So I'd busted through the hard deck, which is an oh shit moment.
Which is 5,000 square or
5,000 feet.
Yeah.
So just over almost a mile above the ocean. And I throw the throttles into idle, put out the speed brake in a desperate attempt to slow this thing down. And very quickly, the ocean was just rushing up. And 2 seconds from impact at a steep 51 degrees nose low dive, it was just instinctual at that point. I had to pull the handle.
Had to.
And I didn't even consciously do it, but my body just from the training got in the right position and yanked the handle. And a normal ejection is pretty violent. It'll compress people's spines. People lose like an inch of stature is pretty regularly, and they'll have to go to the chiropractor.
No doubt.
But this was a way out of the envelope ejection. So this was not what should have been considered a survivable ejection. For the dive angle I was at, the altitude I was at, and the speed, the ejection seat's not designed to get you out of that. But I had no other choice. And so what really damaged me was impacting the sound barrier at that speed, going 695 miles per hour. Air at that speed, it's like hitting concrete.
Sure.
If anybody's ever stuck their arm out of the window of their car going 70 on the highway, imagine a force 100 times that, because that parasitic drag is exponential. So at 700 miles per hour, it's like several, I think it's like 10 times the force of a Category 1 hurricane impacting your body simultaneously. So it's violent. It ripped my helmet off my head. My brain's freaking just smashed inside my skull, causing a traumatic brain injury. I broke my C1 in my neck, so the top spine or vertebrae, and then my arms just ragdolled in that airflow, shattering both my upper arms, the humerus. My right humerus tore through my right brachial artery, causing internal bleeding, and then my left forearm shattered the radius and ulna and severed the median nerve, which controls the left hands.
No compound fractures?
As far as like completely separating?
No, coming through the skin?
Yes, I had both my legs were flailing so violently that the steel-toed boots on my feet were like maces and smashed open my lower tib fibs. I had open leg fractures, compound fractures on both legs, chunks of my bone falling out, bleeding out. My spine compressed, damaging the brachial plexus, which is the nerve group that controls a lot of the upper body. It was so fast that the survival gear on my vest all ripped off. I was wearing a dry suit to protect me from the icy water, but it was so fast it shredded the dry suit apart on me. And within just seconds, fortunately, my parachute automatically deployed and slowed me enough so I didn't die on impact. And this all just happened in a few seconds. I was 2 seconds from impact when I pulled the handle. The aircraft very quickly impacted the ocean and just vaporized. The largest pieces of the aircraft they found were like the size of a crumpled up license plate. But the parachute slowed me just enough that I didn't die when I plummeted into the ocean. And then very quickly, the parachute that had just saved my life sunk underneath that churning ocean swell and started to pull me under. So now I'm paralyzed, bleeding out in shark-infested waters.
You can't use your arms.
On a cold day. Yeah. And
can't use your legs.
And very quickly, that parachute became like a bag of bricks, just pulling me under the water. And at that point, it didn't look good. But fortunately, my flight lead had spotted my parachute opening. He dropped a GPS mark on my position. And with what little fuel he had left, he got over to a fishing vessel. They weren't responding on maritime guard. So he got down really low and really fast and thumped over their bow. And all these guys like, holy shit, what's going on? They got up on maritime guard and communicated with him. And he passed my coordinates and they were able to get over to my position. And they were the first people actually to see me with their eyes. And they weren't able to get me into the boat, which ended up being a good thing. They said, had they pulled me onto the boat, I would have died from the trauma of that and then having to be put back in the water to be picked up by the helicopter. But they at least provided a visual reference point. And had my flight lead not thought so quickly, I would have drifted out into the ocean. Nobody would have found me.
Because that GPS doesn't stay.
And I'm just a little dark head that's largely under the surface of the water getting drowned alive. So it was a real miracle. My beacon had malfunctioned. My survival gear was gone. So it was just kind of the worst case scenario for a pilot ejection. But despite that, they were able to get a couple rescue helicopters on scene. I spent 2 hours in the ocean, just getting drowned alive, sucking in salt water. I don't know how I survived that. But the rescue swimmer got in and was able to get me onto the helicopter into a level 1 trauma center in Norfolk, Virginia. By the time I got there, I remember they took my core body temperature and it was at 87 degrees core body temp. Fahrenheit. So I was severely hypothermic. They treated me for that, multiple blood transfusions for all the blood loss. And once they had me semi-stable, they induced a coma and rushed me into surgery. I spent the next week undergoing over a dozen different trauma surgeries, fasciotomies to salvage all 4 of my extremities from amputation, which is, for those that, I'm sure you're familiar, but for those that don't know, it's where they basically open you up with huge cuts to relieve the pressure from the fascia, because the muscle, when it's damaged with all those injuries, will swell up and it'll cut off circulation to your limbs. And then in the past, they just have to chop your limbs off. But fortunately, they didn't have to do that. They rebuilt my skeleton with titanium rods and steel plates and screws. So now I've got like a no kidding Wolverine X-Man skeleton system.
That'd be a fun X-ray to look at.
Yeah. Oh, it's really cool. It's not quite as good as Travis Pastrana's. I don't know if you've ever seen
one recently. That
dude is all metal.
I almost thought that was fake when I looked at that. I'm like, that much damage to that man's spine?
Dude, that guy's next level.
Yeah, he's crazy.
But yeah, they salvaged me. And after that first week in the coma, they were trying to get me to come back too, and I just wasn't waking up. They ended up transferring me to Portsmouth Naval Hospital, pretty close to Norfolk. And I had a lot of my squadron mates and my family members, my mom and dad had come in, my sister, buddies I went to flight school with, were all in that ICU waiting room to hear if I was going to even wake up. Was he going to be a vegetable? And the mood was pretty gloomy. And one of my buddies in the squadron, Basil, who had been the one that said I hadn't done anything to earn a call sign yet, kind of piped up in the middle of this darkness and was like, he's a scrappy motherfucker. He'll be all right. Kind of lifted the spirit of the room, and everyone's like, yeah, he's a scrappy motherfucker. And so they took that and they turned it into this makeshift acronym, Smurf.
There it is.
And because it's the Navy, you have to have a politically correct cover story. And so they said it was because I was a short guy that turned blue from hypothermia.
Yeah, it's a great cover story.
Yeah. But at least out of all this, I finally had a call sign. After about 2 weeks, I finally opened my eyes and started coming to, but I had no idea where I was. Between the head injury and all the drugs, I was real loopy. I didn't understand that I was so injured. I was just like waking up in your bedroom, except why has your bedroom got all these beeping monitors and people in it? I had no recollection of the ejection or anything that had happened to get me there. It was like waking up from a dream. And
thank goodness, in a way.
Yeah. And I remember, I thought my squadron mates had tied me down onto the bed, but it was because I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. And eventually the docs came in and they said, they're just kind of laying it out, being honest. It's like, hey, you've been in a high-speed ejection. You're never going to be able to walk again. You're never going to be able to use your arms again. And your military flying career is over. And that was a pretty dark moment, like, holy shit. But there was also this little spark of fire in me that was like, fuck you guys, I'm going to prove you wrong. Right. And fortunately, that was the little spark that I started to tender to and feed. And I think I had an opportunity there where I could have bit off on all that darkness and taken what they said as gospel and just gone down the dark road of taking drugs the rest of my life and end up as another homeless veteran, broken. But instead, I saw like this other way. What if I get better? What if I can prove them wrong? And so it kind of became my mission to prove these motherfuckers wrong and get back in the jet. And so I spent the next 2 years undergoing more surgeries. I had to go through an investigation process for the mishap, which was incredibly stressful. And just had to get a stack of medical waivers that was its own miracle. But after 2 years, I'd overcome prescription drug addiction. I had regained the ability to max out the Navy's physical fitness test again. And I was literally running circles around the squadron mates I was stationed with while I was recovering. And so they're like, holy crap, this guy's back.
Nice.
And one day I'm sitting there doing boring computer work that I had to do while I was recovering. And the base Commodore comes in and he's like, or the Strike Fighter Wing Atlantic Commodore comes in. He goes, hey, Gill, what are you doing today? And, working on email or whatever. He's like, you want to go back and fly instead? I was like, yes, sir. And end up going back to flying Super Hornets after all that.
Let's go through your recovery a little bit because
yeah,
I think your mindset and your resilience sets you apart. And it's definitely something I want some of the listeners to pull from this. Life's going to throw some really hard things at people, and you've got to have a mindset to get through it.
Sure.
So let's go back to right where you said, you're told I can't do it. There's from there to the getting back in the plane, I think that's a pretty dark spot. How bad did that get? And let's go over the recovery, how deep, how dark that went, all that kind of stuff in there.
Yeah, I found myself just feeling like a complete failure at times, feeling like I had let down everybody who trusted me with that aircraft, that everyone was going to hate me because, I'm just this guy who crashed a jet. And
An $89 million jet.
Yeah, $89 million jet. And so I had a lot of weight on my shoulders of how am I going to dig myself out of this hole? And I remember I found myself, they had me on so many pain meds. I was on oxycodone, OxyContin, tramadol, trazodone, amitriptyline, plus everything to counter those side effects, and then massive doses of gabapentin. I was taking the max dose you could at that time, which was 2,400 milligrams a day. And
some of these are like horse tranquilizers too.
Yeah, I was not functioning well, and my body was changing. I was getting all doughy and weak, and I was always tired. And I remember one day I was just laying out. My squadron mate Fisty had me move in with him while I was recovering. I was laying out by his pool in the sun one day, and I just had a big old glass full of whiskey and a bottle of OxyContin, and I'm pounding that and pounding the whiskey, and I'm just like melting into the freaking seat, melting between the little vinyl covers on it onto the ground, just feeling like complete bliss mush. But I remember finding myself in that place, and I was like, is this what I really want to do the rest of my life? And everybody was pointing, that's the direction I'm going. Like, oh, this is you. You're broken now. It's okay. You can be broken. Just take your drugs and be happy. Mm-hmm. And there's so much coddling to like put you in that place. But I remember being in that place and like, this isn't what I want the rest of my life to be. This is so artificial. This is so fake. And so with the support of, I had a lot of surprising support from the fighter community. These guys are like, holy shit, man, you're alive. That's awesome. Like, welcome back. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't believe that I wanted to go back and fly. But there was, all my friends started coming out and taking me out and getting me out doing stuff. I remember they took me out wake surfing one day. They had to like wheel me down in a wheelchair to the dock and get me onto the boat. Like everyone's helping me. But by the end of the day, I was like trying to get out and get up on this wake surfboard. And, it was awesome just to have that kind of friendship and getting back in the ocean, getting back with my friends. A little later, I could barely put my wetsuit on because my arms were so damaged, but they got me out. I went down surfing in the Outer Banks, and it was big, heavy swell. It was like 12-foot waves that day.
You're talking like surfing on a surfboard.
Yeah, on a surfboard in the ocean. And there was a lot of apprehension, like, what's it going to be like to be back in the ocean, especially if I get held under. But I went out there and I got smashed a few times. My buddy Neil saw me just get freaking smashed by this wave, and it held me under. And I remember coming up, I was like almost out of air. And then as I went for a breath, I started to let the last one out, and then another wave held me under. I was back on the bottom, just getting ragdolled on the bottom of the ocean. And I eventually got back to the surface and took a huge breath of air. And my buddy Neil's sitting there on his surfboard. He's like, dude, I thought you were dead again. And we just started laughing. And it was like the best therapy ever, was just like getting back out. My buddy Spicoli started taking me out downhill mountain biking. I could barely use the front brake, but I put on all the body armor I could buy and a full face helmet and gloves and everything. And I was out there just trying to send it off jumps and do dumb stuff. But
that's exhilarating. Downhill mountain biking,
feeling alive again. Yeah,
sure.
And a lot of my, at least on the physical rehabilitation side, a lot of my recovery came through what I was doing outside the clinic. I was doing a lot of conventional physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy and all of these things. But what really I think helped me the most was that on my own, I was getting out and doing things that were active to get my body working again. I started playing the piano again, which gave me a lot more function of my hands that had been so injured. And little by little, I just started to get things back. But it was because I wanted to get better. I think a lot of people can get into a place where they're broken and they don't think they have to get better and they don't want to get better. And if your heart isn't behind it, it doesn't matter how much therapy you're going to go do in a clinical setting, you're not going to get better.
Right. Yeah, but that's a mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever thought about where that comes from?
Honestly, it comes from childhood trauma. Yeah, I think this is actually pretty prevalent in the world of high performing military members and in general, special forces guys, especially, but just having a profound traumatic experience as a young person can build a resilience in you where you have to rely on yourself in those dark times. And when you get down to the bottom of that dark barrel and have to work your way back out of it, it gives you a special something that I think you can get through anything.
Well, you know from a young age you're capable of doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's when you go through that traumatic event and you successfully get through it, your nerve system leaves like a pattern and you're like, oh, this is hard stuff, but I can do this again.
Yeah, I think it was that. And I think it was also, I had this experience where I just felt like I wasn't deserving of love. And so I had to do extraordinary things to prove that I was worth loving. And I think that's in part what drove me to be a fighter pilot in the first place was I need to do something extraordinary to prove to people that I'm worthwhile, that I'm a good person, that I'm worth being loved. And I think it was a lot of that going through my recovery as well. It's like I have to do this so I can prove to people that I'm worthwhile, that I'm a good person. And that was a powerful fire. And there was a lot of rage, a lot of anger that came from that in childhood that I carried with me for a long time. And rage can be a really powerful fuel, but it's really hard on the engines, man.
Yeah,
it's a nitroglycerin. And I used it though to my advantage. And now later in life, I've learned other fuel sources that are much more sustainable. But at the time, I was just running on self-doubt, self-loathing, and rage, really.
Keeping you going.
And I had a real desire to just get back on the horse that bucked me off. I didn't want that to be the end of my chapter.
Sure.
And miraculously got me back into the jet. And this is kind of where the happy ending should be, right? Where I just fly off into the sunset and live happily ever after. But there was a whole nother chapter after that where it was even more challenging than any of the stuff I've gone through previously.
Well, let's hear a little bit about how that works. So you get back to flying. What were the challenges that you hit the second time around?
Yeah, so I was back. I was physically feeling good, mentally feeling good. I would occasionally have little lapses from the brain injury where I'd forget something or just have a day where I wasn't quite feeling on. I had a lot of physical pain still at times, mostly from pushing myself maybe too hard at the CrossFit gym and like just doing dumb stuff I shouldn't be doing. But overall, I was feeling good. But then I kind of got back into the grind of being in a squadron, back in a fleet squadron where you're working your ass off all the time under high stress. And I had already taken such a toll on my physiology. I had the brain injury component of it. And then you start to pile on more stressors, more traumatic stuff, more intense training. And that all takes a toll on the nervous system and the brain. And I was out on a flight this is about a year and a half after I'd been back flying. And when I came back from the flight, I just felt completely off.
You were solo on the flight?
I was flying with other people, but solo in the aircraft.
In the plane.
Yeah. And I came back and I was watching my tapes in the debrief and getting confused by the symbology and things that I was very familiar with. I remember I went back to the hotel that we were staying at on this detachment, and I sat down on the bed that night, and the whole room tumbled around me from vertigo. I'd never had vertigo before.
That's a wild feeling.
And I remember I picked up my phone because I had to set my alarm for the time to get up in the morning so I could fly. And I couldn't figure out how to operate my cell phone alarm. And there'd been a number of issues in the Hornet and Super Hornet communities with the pressurization systems malfunctioning and causing random fluctuations in the cabin pressure, which for any scuba divers out there, they're familiar with the bends where you come up from depth too quickly. The nitrogen can come out of solution in your blood and cause little bubbles to form.
So same thing can happen in flight?
It can, yeah, from that same pressure change. And so you get those in your joints. It's really painful, the bends. But this was type 2 decompression sickness, which is where that gets up into the brain and blocks blood flow to the brain.
And that's what was happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And it had been a serious issue in the community, enough so that when I reached out to the squadron safety officer, it was actually Squeezer, the guy who I had my first flight with years prior. And I told him what was going on, and they rushed me to Mayport Dive Base, which was nearby where we were in Tyndall and down in Florida.
Yeah.
And they took me into the dive base and they put me in the chamber for the night. And I felt a little bit better, but there was still something off. And the next morning I went back to check in with the doc, and he's like, when you get back from this detachment, you need to go see medical, which is the last thing you want to have to do as a pilot, because that jeopardizes your security clearance, that jeopardizes your flight medical.
Future.
And so I'd worked so hard to get there. And now all of a sudden I got this other thing that nobody can even really see. It's just this thing in my head. But reluctantly, when I got back, I went into the doc and said, hey, here's what's going on. I don't know what it is. Something's not quite right. And I did it because I recognized that I could no longer safely operate the jet, and I needed to get some solutions so I could get back at it. But very quickly, that led me into the world of psychiatric medicine. They started wanting to know about my emotions and how I was feeling, and started doing cognitive behavioral therapy.
Did
and all
you remind them you didn't have any emotions?
Right. Yeah. Well, no, that was the thing, is like, I could compartmentalize so well at this point. Like this isn't just some emotional thing.
Right.
But that's kind of what it got painted as. And pretty quickly I had a delayed onset PTSD diagnosis, which, impacted my flying career like a warhead. And before long, they started pushing more pills. Here, take this med to help you sleep. Take this med to help with the anxiety. And that kind of sucked me back down a hole that I didn't want to go down. I remembered the pain meds and how much that had messed me up.
Right.
But they painted as this is the only solution available. If you want to get better, you have to try this stuff. And the whole brain injury component, the whole allostatic load that I've been operating, operator syndrome, all these things that are now starting to come to light and be more prevalent, were just no one had a clue about. So it was all about the emotional piece of it. And so pretty quickly, I found myself losing my career, losing my community, and feeling just like a complete failure. And I remember laying in bed one night as this is all going down, and I went to reach. I had a Glock 19 in the end table by the bed, and I pulled it out, and I started wondering, what's the muzzle going to feel like on my teeth? What's the gun oil going to taste like in my mouth? And as I go to put this thing in my mouth, I look, and my beautiful wife and newborn baby boy were sleeping beside me, and I didn't want to wake them up, so I put the gun away. I ended up continuing to deteriorate as the meds went up and up, as they're just trying to mask these symptoms by actually deal with the underlying physiology that's causing it.
Oh.
And, I started experiencing psychoses. I started, because I wasn't sleeping was the biggest thing. I could no longer rest. My fight or flight nervous system mode was so amped up all the time that I just couldn't shut it off. So I could not sleep unless I had copious amounts of drugs to knock me out, which wasn't giving me restful sleep. It wasn't helping me recover.
No.
Just some drug-induced form of unconsciousness. But as that got worse and progressed, I remember I could no longer distinguish between my imagination and my physical reality, and everything started to blend together in ways that I at times I thought I was being hunted by government assassins. My wife would be cooking dinner. She's taking care of a newborn baby, and then she'd have me come in the house. She'd just finished dinner for everybody, and I'd run in and I'd dump it all in the garbage, and I'd dump out the water, say, it's poisoned. And then I would like jump and duck and hide because I thought someone was trying to shoot me through the window. She took me to the commissary to go shopping, because at this point she had to watch me all the time. And I remember going in, and everybody looked like these ghouls. Everyone had these big black eyes and fangs, and we're all distorted. And it was so real to me. I thought it was what was actually going on. Mm-hmm. And when I got outside, I remember my wife, Kara, had me stand with our baby boy who's in the cart. And she's like, be here. She'd forgotten one thing inside. She said, I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Stay where I can see you. And she goes inside to the commissary to grab something. And in that time, for whatever reason, I took off with the baby and just disappeared out into the parking lot. And so she comes out and she's like, oh my God.
Yeah, you're not
my
here.
Baby boy's gone with the crazy man. And so she's just freaking out, thinking, how long can a baby survive without its mother, all alone and exposed to the elements, and like is going to like call the police. And then she looks around the parking lot, and I'm like hiding behind a car with the baby. We're just sitting there. But I was just so unpredictable, and all the staff at the psych unit in the psych department were like, you need to inpatient him. You can't take care of him anymore. But she was an ER trauma nurse, and so she kind of knew what that meant. She didn't want that to happen to me.
No, that's bad.
Eventually, I was medically retired from the military and continued that same treatment through the VA, which was more problems, more pills, more pills, more problems. That was the go-to solution. Oh, you want to get better from this? The only answer is to take Seroquel for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And I remember it was within a few days of having my dose increased from 300 milligrams a night to 450 milligrams a night of Seroquel or quetiapine. And my wife came home from a job interview, and I was rustling around in one of the bedrooms. And when she came in, I was completely bare ass naked. I'd shaved off my hair in chunks for some reason. My eyebrows were missing. And I had a black garbage bag tied around my neck like a cape because I thought I was freaking naked Batman that was going to go fight crime in the northern Michigan snowy weather.
Oh,
And so that got me, she drove me to the emergency room, and I was admitted into the plexiglass room there. And I had just a full on out of body experience there, traveling through time and space. And some people have described this as like being in purgatory. Like I'd basically, my soul had left my body and I was dead. And so my soul was searching where it was going to go next. But I decided to come back to my body at some point in that, try to make things right. But when I came back to a few days later, I had been transferred down to the Battle Creek Inpatient Psychiatric Facility run by the VA. And I came to on this cold, what felt like a prison room floor, with this bright fluorescent light blasting in through the window. I would see little faces pop in front of it on a kid. And it was really dark. Like I didn't understand where I was or what was happening. Eventually I kind of came to my wits and started to come out of that deep psychosis enough to walk around the facility. And as I settled into this place, I just saw it was a pretty broken place to try to heal. Every 15 minutes, they're required to come into your room and wake you up with a flashlight in your face to make sure you're safe. So you're already can't sleep. You're already on high alert all the time. And now somebody comes in your room every 15 minutes. And it's not an easy place to sleep to begin with. It's all concrete walls, tile floors, white fluorescent lighting outside the rooms that just pours in. And there's always people going up and down the hallways, yelling and screaming. There's all these other veterans in there having severe psychiatric issues. The food was just abysmal quality, highly processed junk, no nutritional value. The water that you're drinking out of the tap tastes so bad that you have to mix it with this artificially flavored, artificially sweetened iced tea mix so that you can even palate the stuff. You would maybe get to go outside once a week if you were lucky, oftentimes less than that, into a concrete yard surrounded by high-rise metal fencing and high-rise brick buildings. No connection to nature, no sunlight, no exercise. Everything there was to facilitate you onto more medications. That was the only tool that they had in that facility. And, you know, I went through survival training in the military, and you get to experience what it would be like to be a prisoner of war. And in that, you take perfectly healthy, mentally capable guys going into the special forces community or as aviators. And, you know, these are highly capable people with their wits about them. Now you put people into a week of, you know, stress, malnourishment, no sleep, and confinement and being treated less than human. And those perfectly healthy people will start to have visual and auditory hallucination. Now you look at the VA facility that's doing the exact same things to guys already in psychoses that are trying to get better. What do they expect to happen? And it felt to me it was intentional because that was the cash cow for the pharmaceutical industry. All the meds that they could push on you.
That's dark.
Yeah, it was a very dark place. I eventually tried to escape unsuccessfully. I ended up being committed to the facility at that point. I lost all legal rights. There was no trial. I just immediately I already couldn't, they wouldn't let me leave anyways, but now it was an additional legal burden to get out, even though I really wanted to get out of there.
Because of the escape attempt?
Yeah, because of the escape attempt.
And how'd you get caught?
So I pulled a fire alarm in the middle of the night, hoping that we would all go outside. And then those of us that wanted to, I had been stockpiling food and warm clothes and had made weapons out of like wet balled up socks inside a tube stop so I could like fight if I needed to. But it was apparently somebody had already tried that trick. And instead the base police got called in. And next thing I know, there's dudes with guns in the facility.
Locking the place down.
They forcibly injected me with this shit called Haldol. That was supposed to be to calm you down, but it made me feel like there were insects crawling out through my skin. All I wanted to do was run and scream and rip my own skin off for about 45 minutes to an hour before I finally just collapsed on the floor. But it was physical and emotional torture. Eventually, with the advocacy of my family, I got out of that facility and got back to nature in northern Michigan, on our little farm outside, breathing fresh air. And I was really broken at this point. I was just a shell of a man. I could barely do the dishes. I couldn't read anymore because as soon as I read a paragraph, I would just forget it. I was on so many drugs. I don't even know what all I was on at that point, but I was a completely different person. I had gone from this high performing, capable human to just like a sloth vegetable, man. And I remember my little kids would come up and try to play with me, and I'd tell them to leave me alone. I'd push them away. And I was on the verge of divorce with my wife. Really, the only thing that kept us together was my wife's legitimate fear that if we did get divorced, that I might gain some custody of our kids and hurt them in another psychosis. But there was no love there. She was trapped, and I was just broken. And fortunately, I had a friend reach out to me, my friend Matt Myers, who runs the M22 shop in Traverse City. He's like, "Hey man, we're going to go mountain biking." So he took me up to Marquette. We spent a couple days up there just out in the woods, mountain biking. And when we got done, he handed me the book called Finding Ultra by Rich Roll, which is all about this guy who's a corporate attorney, just burnt out in the corporate world and was abusing all sorts of stuff, alcohol, really struggling, and decided to just take on physical challenges again. He started going out for runs and started eating a lot cleaner. And so my friend Matt gave me that book, and I started reading it and saw like maybe I need to just focus on holistic stuff and that'll help. And that improved me slightly. And then I stumbled upon the book called How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, which is all about the use of psychedelic assisted therapy for treating mental health conditions. Mm-hmm. And it opened my eyes, like there is another way ahead. And it doesn't have to be these pills for the rest of my life. This doesn't have to be the way I am. Because basically at this point, this is as good as it's going to get for you, according to all the people with degrees, all the psychiatrists and psychology team. You just got to take your pills and be grateful you're alive. But that was a dark place. And so I was excited to see that there's another option. And I started reaching out to some veteran nonprofit organizations that provided that treatment, and initially didn't qualify for it.
What, you weren't bad enough?
Well, at first it was really just for special forces members. They had a very tight sort of window of the people that would get treated through those programs, and it's gradually expanding more and more. But they call it like Schindler's List. There's so many veterans in need of that kind of treatment because they're stuck in the VA system and conventional healthcare. It's just an overwhelming amount of people trying to get that care. And at this point, it's only being provided by nonprofit organizations, and they're just swamped. But eventually I got into the world of psychedelic assisted therapy. And it was just like a whole new perspective on life. It completely changed the trajectory. It allowed me to see the connection between the medications and how bad I had gotten. I started to work myself off more and more of the meds, get myself clean. I continued the healthy lifestyle, which was a really important component of all of it. Was just eating well, drinking clean water, getting exercise, sunlight, nature, connection, finding purpose, finding all those things that help you thrive again. I started to get access to traumatic brain injury clinics through an organization called Defenders of Freedom down in Texas. Brought me in for a 2-week intensive brain clinic. And that was the first time that I got pointed like, hey, this isn't just some emotional thing you're dealing with. Your physiological nervous system has been damaged from such a high allostatic load and physical trauma and brain injury. And now that's being more and more recognized as what's called operator syndrome, which is kind of the combination of all those things that causes guys to burn out that they initially studied in the operator community. So the SEALs and the Green Berets and Rangers, and they really sound that it's a lot more than just PTSD going on. This isn't just some emotional thing. These guys can deal with emotional stuff. Why is it affecting them so bad if it's just emotional? And it's the nervous system changes. When you're stressed out all the time, operating in those environments, not sleeping, probably drinking too much because that's a part of those communities. Like all that stuff takes a toll over time. And then you throw in some brain injuries and all the other shit, the high G forces, explosions, gunfire, all of that stuff.
Pressure.
The pressures, the pressure malfunction. It changes the physiology of the body and the nervous system. And so you get this, the amygdala gets out of whack, which is like your fight or flight mode just cranked up to 11 all the time. And you get this super highway of nervous reaction, which is you're always stressed. So you can be sitting in a quiet room and you feel like something terrible is about to happen. And it's just because that nervous pathway just gets so overused, and then you just get stuck there. And I started to see that you can heal that. You can heal the brain. You can heal the nervous system. you can get it back into the rest and digest so you can start to sleep again. And it was a gradual, slow process. And I had so much help. But at the baseline of all of it was really that healthy lifestyle changes that I started to implement in conjunction with access to those treatments that started to put me on a new trajectory. And I went from on the verge of divorce, struggling to read a book, barely able to do the dishes, to now being an author, a coach, a family man, a dad, a husband, and have a new sense of purpose in my life. And there's a quote I love by Carl Jung, which is, "No tree can grow to the heavens without roots into hell." And I've seen that by going through so much darkness and being such a deep place, it's allowed me to grow to newer heights that I could have never achieved if I hadn't seen that darkness.
Mhm.
And at this point, I've become grateful for all this experience. For a long time, I harbored a lot of anger, and I still have some anger against the VA system and all that. But it's given me the opportunity to live an even better life.
Yeah, it's a deep perspective to be able to see that darkness and still see the light,
Yeah.
right? And I think your book points directly to that, and it brings people to that conclusion.
Yeah.
So it was wonderfully well written. I laughed at it. Definitely some really hard stuff in there,
Sure.
but it speaks exactly to this human struggle
Absolutely.
and deep, deep sense of trying to find our purpose. My sister works for a nonprofit in Texas called Boot Campaign. You
Okay. I
come
haven't
across
heard
that?
that one.
That was the Marcus Luttrell.
Oh, okay. I've met
Um,
Marcus before. I was on his podcast, actually.
There you go.
Yeah.
So his nonprofit, and I think they do the same thing. They try to get veterans all these services you're talking about.
Excellent.
So
Yeah, the
there's
nonprofit space has really filled that gap.
yeah, it's a good thing. There's a lot of good ones doing
Yeah.
some good work.
Absolutely.
One of the things I read in the book that part of your healing was woodwork.
Yeah.
Right? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when I was really struggling and like losing my squadron, and I was still in Lemoore, California at that point, stationed with VFA 136. Well, actually, it was actually just prior to that my friend Leo, who was a medic with the SEAL teams out of Amnec, Virginia, like a high level military medic, the SF guys. He one day it was my birthday. We used to go surfing together. We had a little crew of guys that would go surf in Virginia Beach. And he one day on my birthday, he brought me this big block of wood. And it was this beautiful East Indian rosewood that he had acquired while he was on a deployment, like snuck back in a Conex box or something. And at this point, I didn't woodwork or anything. I was like, what am I going to do with the big old block of wood? And even he is like, later, he said, I don't even know why I gave you that. But once I got it, I was like, I need to make something with it because the patterns and the colors in it were so cool. So I bought a little lathe and I started shaping little pipes, and I started making pipes for guys. And the first one I made, I gave back to Leo, who gave me the block of wood.
Oh, that's cool.
And he was so stoked by it. But that evolved over time, especially when I was really struggling, like as I was kind of getting separated from the military, going through I call it the bureaucratic equivalent of the Indiana Jones Temple of Doom, going through a medical board. Like there's a disaster of bureaucracy that goes into that. And, but I started woodworking and I started developing a skill to make wooden surfboards. So I just got deeper and deeper into the woodwork, and by just the focus that it takes in order to like not chop your finger off with woodworking was especially helpful because you have to be present. And when you're present at that level of focus and concentration, the brain can't be spinning at 1,000,000 miles per hour, imagining that you're going to get shot by a government sniper.
You could slow it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It gave me something to direct my energy and focus towards and have something that I was proud of. And it also, it just gave me something constructive that I could make.
So I did something for you. One of my buddies is one of the best board builders in the world. And I got you a 1-hour session with him.
Oh, nice.
This is my gift to you.
Thank you. That's awesome.
His name is Jason Thielen. And he's got Little Bay Boards,
Nice.
which builds some, I'm not joking, some of the nicest boards in the world. So
That's awesome. Thank you so much. That's
maybe
really
if you
generous.
got 5 or 10 minutes after they get down here, we'll just swing up to a shop and
I'd love to
say hi to him.
That'd be awesome.
And
Thank you.
yeah, it's pretty cool. So, and another friend of mine, this is pretty cool. This is a pheasant pelt
Nice.
And he asked if, he's in the book, you said you're an outdoorsman.
Yeah.
So he wanted to donate this and give this to you.
Oh, that's really generous.
That's Troy. He's got TES construction up here. And then when I saw this, I kind of thought about the cover of your book just because of the colors in this bird. I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. So
That's
we're going to
awesome.
also do this for you.
Thank you so much.
That can get put up on the wall somewhere.
Yeah, I will.
It's very, I've never seen a pheasant pelt, and I've done a lot of pheasant hunting. So I thought it was
that's beautiful.
It's a unique gift in the sense I was like, man, I got to give him something cool that he's never going to get somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
thank you so much. It's really generous.
Well, you're very welcome. I think you've been through a lot. Your book really articulates it well. I encourage anybody listening to this, get on Amazon, find that. We'll have a link underneath it.
Yeah, there's a lot more in the book that
there's a lot
of the broad
more.
strokes. So
yeah. There's some really good stuff in the book, and some of that should be read. I kind of think it's good that that's there. All right, so then you get through all this healing, and then I really want to hear about the Margigesic.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is a wild altar. So for the people that don't know about it, and the only reason I know about it is because I've read about it. I've never actually attended it or in it. But what I understand, and you correct me if I'm wrong, the Margigesic is one of the craziest mountain bike races in the country.
Oh yeah,
happens outside of Marquette. They advertise 100 miles. It's never 100 miles, right?
Nope.
Intentionally to mess with you, probably.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think that the finish line is ever the same. So you're never sure if it's 101 or 115.
Yeah, they change the course every year.
Yeah. It's so wild. I've heard there's places you got to walk your bike downhill.
Oh yeah.
And it's a race through the night.
Yep.
So what is it, 24 hours or longer?
Yeah, you have, I think, 25 hours to complete the 100.
Okay.
And so, yeah, most people end up, unless you're one of the ultra performance athletes that have done it a bunch, that can get it done sooner, you almost always end up in the darkness, navigating. And it gets more brutal the further you go through it. It's, I started getting into mountain biking more as I was in my recovery. I found it really helpful just to get out in the woods, get some exercise, and you have to be present with mountain biking or you'll smash your head into a tree, which keeps you in a good place when you're dealing with mental health struggles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started getting more and more into it, started racing. And my same buddy, Matt, had kind of pulled me out when I was in a bad spot. It's like, hey, you want to race the Margie? And so we ended up signing up together. And man, I trained my ass off for that year. I had a custom training plan. I was working out every day. I was doing like 2 to 6 hour rides almost every day. It was really
training.
involved. But I ended up going up to Marquette, and the Margigesic 100, its claim to fame is they say it's the most brutal single day mountain bike race in the nation. And people come from all over the world to do it. And there's a lot of other 100-mile plus mountain bike races, but this one is extremely technical. And even guys that come from out west that are riding up in the big mountains are like, this is as brutal, if not more brutal than the stuff we ride, because we don't have the elevation, but they make up for it in just how technically challenging the terrain is. And the further you get on the race, the more difficult the terrain gets, to the point where you're like literally going up stuff that you can barely climb up while you're carrying your bike, or going down stuff that you can barely get down. I mean, you see people,
and you're still carrying your bike.
Yeah, you see people on the side with their legs snapped in half. Like it's no joke, and it's all self-supported. So you have to carry all your own water, all your own supplies. There's one checkpoint where you can pick up and resupply. And there's people out on the trail angels that'll give you stuff, but
trail angels.
You're really largely just self-supported. And if you get in a bad situation, you got to get yourself out of the woods
because you're alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was an incredible challenge, and I was proud to finish it. My thing the whole way through was like, I'm basically a high functioning cripple guy at this point. Like, what's the worst that could happen? I'm going to try to do it anyways. But as I got further and further in the race, and there's a lot of serious athletes that are doing this. It's no joke. And so as I started to pass more of them and see more people quitting and pulling out of the race, it's like, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this. And I got a broken body. So it's another test of the mind.
I was going to say, you healed your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's what gets you through something like that.
for sure.
Yeah, I think if you don't finish that race, you're called a quitter. Is that right?
Yep. Yep. You got to text to their number to let them know you're falling out. You text them hashtag quitter. Yeah. Yeah. So it's kind of like,
Yeah,
you
it's
get
more
kicked in the
mind
balls.
games.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's all it is. It's definitely mind games on
And
there.
it's literally, the whole course is designed to make you quit. It's to push you to your limits, is kind of their goal. And yeah, they'll mess with you. They say it's a 100 miles race and it ends up being 115. And the last 15 is the most brutal stuff that you've hit the whole course. And so you'll get to 100 and people will start getting kind of cheery, like, oh, we got to be getting close. If you occasionally you'll pass people in the dark, like, I don't think we're there yet,
Did you ever feel like, man, am I on the right path? Like, do you ever feel like you're off?
Yeah, you have so you have a GPX file so you can follow, but it's not real great. And then there's signage occasionally, but there's definitely some points where you're like out in the woods in the middle of the night and it's creepy. You're like, I don't know if I'm on even the right trail right now, which can be pretty disheartening.
Sure.
But I didn't get lost on it, fortunately.
Good. And then the other thing I read was there were these tokens.
Yeah.
So you can finish this race, miss a token, and not technically finish it.
Yeah, you have to be on the lookout for them all the time because you don't know where they're going to put them. And sometimes they'll put a sign out with them and there's not actually a token in it. And they're just like, haha, got you. Keep looking. And so they're messing with you on a mind fuck kind of with that too.
Oh, how many tokens did you have to collect?
On mine, it was 4, but every year it's different. Every year the tokens are different. One year people had to collect acorns. It was like, one year it was lollipops. It changes every year what you're collecting and how many and where they'll be. And just don't know. They keep you on your toes.
You think you'll ever race again?
Maybe. But I kind of, I kind of got that out of my system.
I was going to say, one and done. You can I can do it.
Yeah. I think I got what I needed out of that. I ended up going back and racing the 50 the year after. And it's a cool race. And I liked having something to train for. But I started doing jujitsu, and that's kind of really taken over my priorities of workout. And I absolutely love that sport. It's
got your blue belt yet?
Almost. Yeah. I'm real close to it. I started about 1.5 years ago. And so it won't be long I show that blue belt, but it's, dude, it's like the best mental health therapy I've ever done. Like any rage I have in me is gone at the end of that session.
Nice.
Between having someone try to choke you out or choking other people out, it's, there's something that I think men need. That's, a physical outlet like that.
Yeah, that's
it's
a good
really
one.
Healthy.
I had trained jiu-jitsu up to kind of middle of my blue belt.
Cool.
So, yeah, and the reason I had stopped was a couple of the guys that I trained with got hurt pretty bad.
Yeah.
And then I realized, man, I can't afford that because I had a busy practice and stuff.
Sure.
And then when I stopped training, it took me 1 year to turn my neck properly.
Yeah.
That's how hard we were training.
It seems
all
like
the time I was just walking around, couldn't turn my neck. So, and I mean, literally 1 year before I could actually fully move it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've had a few injuries through. I broke a couple ribs last year after I'd only been doing like 6 months, cracked a couple ribs, tore my rotator cuff, strained my back. Like I guess it just comes with the sport. But,
well, it's physical.
It keeps me coming back for some reason.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one.
But if I injure, I'll take a few weeks off as I need and let it heal. I see some guys in there trying to push it when they're still injured. And I'm like, man, you're just dragging this out.
Yeah. All right. You got any parting wisdom you want to give us? Anything?
Man,
what are you doing now? Like if someone wants to get in contact with you, obviously they can purchase the book. What are you doing behind the book?
Yeah. On the back side of the book, I've got my website and kind of, I offer coaching services for people that are going through their own challenges.
Okay. Give us the website.
It's just www.kegangill.com.
Okay.
And, you can get on there. You can find me on Instagram at Kegan Smurf Gill is a really easy way to get a hold of me. I'm on LinkedIn. And I do coaching for folks that are going through whatever. I can help a lot with mindset. My focus, my primary thing is getting people through injuries. If you're injured and want to get back at it, or you just find yourself, I deal with a lot of folks that are in high stress professions, a lot of law enforcement, firefighters, military, but also business executives that have found themselves working their asses off their whole lives and their bodies aren't working the way they want and they want to get some more balance in their life. And I can really help instill the mindset and the steps necessary to get out of that. And it's all about where are you now and where do you want to go? We're not going to be stuck in your past really. Well, I want to get your history, but it's really about like, what are practical steps that you can start implementing today to start getting to be the healthiest, most thriving version of yourself.
I think you'd be very good at that.
I am. And I really enjoy it. And then I speak professionally all over the country. So if you're ever looking for a professional speaker for an event, I got a powerful story I think can make some waves in your organization.
You definitely got a good story. All right, my friend. Well, thank you for sharing your story today. It's touching. It's amazing to sit across the desk from you and hear all you've been through. Yeah, it's inspiring.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on and let me share my story.
I definitely want it. So jump on Amazon, Phoenix Revival. Oh, that's the last one I want to ask. How'd you come up with that title?
Yeah, I really liked the story of the Phoenix rising from the ashes. And Revival sounded really cool with it. So Phoenix Revival, what it became.
It is really cool. And once you get to the end of that book, it's exactly what happens. So, you did a great job on that.
It's a pathway for anybody who's dealing with struggle in life. It doesn't have to be physical, mental, just whatever you're going through and having a hard time, it can help give you a baseline of lifestyle choices and direction and maybe inspiration to get you where you want to go.
Good. So, hey, I want you guys to support Kegan here. Buy the book on Amazon. Check out the website. Follow him on Instagram. And we appreciate you tuning in today. Keegan, thank you for being here, sir.
My pleasure.